Good afternoon, colleagues. It is 244th day of heroic struggle of Ukraine. I am Natalia and we are working from Medіацентру Ukraine. We have Hryhoriy Plachkov online with us, the former head of the State Nuclear Regulatory Inspectorate. We see and we observe those statements and blackmailing of Russia regarding Ukraine, regarding the usage of nuclear weapon systems. Mr. Hryhoriy, there is already a statement that Russia urges Ukraine as a nuclear terrorism. How to react to this, and what should we expect from Russia? Well, one has to expect from Russia everything that can even be outside of common sense. But yes, there is a statement that Russian Federation is conducting unsanctioned works on the premises of processed nuclear power without licensed personnel, and not definitely not in accordance with Ukrainian legislation. And all in all, yes, this the situation quite intensive, closer to the storages. And also there is the Minister of Defense of Russia statement that Ukraine is kind of developing or designing a dirty bomb. And this also urges kind of our attention and cautiousness. So regarding this dirty bomb, as Russians say, we are observing that Zaporizhia NPP is under the control of Russian Federation soldiers, and IAEA agreed to come, but partially they declined the statement of Russia that Ukraine is capable of development of a dirty bomb. Are there any doubts that Ukraine cannot have something to do with it, or Ukraine has something to do with it? Well, if the Minister of Defense of the aggression country doesn't know that in Ukraine has enough nuclear materials in different shapes and forms, and not only Zaporizhia NPP, and they're trying to make quite a massive informational field around this question, then it means that their eyes are not widely open, because everyone understands that in Ukraine there is too many objects that are using nuclear power oil, and those objects who are working with the processed power oil. And all in all, this is the fake statements, and it's not the first time we can hear them in this kind of international informational field. All in all, this is just an attempt to create a picture where Ukraine, is trying to disobey some kind of agreement with not increase of nuclear weapon systems, and not increase the volumes of processed nuclear oil. So all in all, there is the thought that Russians have something in mind, and they are trying to accuse Ukraine in it. So when we are thinking in these narratives of Russia, is it just blackmailing, or will there be any actions Russians will go for, where they'll put Ukraine and Russians under threat? Well, to my mind, it will not come to this. I think that all this is informational fake and fabrications that are put there into informational field, and this is the suicide. And we all understand that never we will use any dirty bombs on our territory, because since this is our land and we are not a nuclear terrorist as the Russian Federation is. That is why, again, this is just informational fabrications that Russian Federation is trying to force all over the world, and then to accuse us. So the visit of IAEA in Ukraine, what should we expect from this inspection and results from IAEA results? Well, first of all, IAEA inspectors are there on the premises of Zaporizhia NPP. Recently, there was a rotation with 2 inspectors, from 2 into 4 inspectors, and according to the recent statement of exploiting organization, they are not allowed to come closer to the nuclear materials. That first of all is guaranteed by us, and the task of international of IAEA is not increase the volumes of nuclear materials, and the amount of these materials in Zaporizhia NPP is big, as well as the radiation waste on the premises of NPP. And according to the second statement of IAEA, they will try to agree with Russian Federation about so-called safe zone around Zaporizhia NPP. And there is a statement in the statement of Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russian Federation that is are emphasizing that from NPP, by means of our military resources, we will leave it because one has to protect nuclear materials, Ukrainian nuclear materials that are there right now. And when it comes to the discussion of the safety zones, they are ready to go for it. That's why, to sum up, I think that first of all, that will be the control of nuclear materials that is there on the premises of Zaporizhia NPP, and second, this will be a creation of safety zone around the Zaporizhia NPP. And I'm wondering all the time, why do they talk only about Zaporizhia NPP when it comes to dirty bombs? Can you please tell why is it evokes some wonder in your mind? Because Zaporizhia NPP doesn't have necessary and equipment in order to assemble and disassemble to process that is there in the active zone of reactor and then to do something with it. That is why I'm wondering. It's wondering why do they say about Zaporizhia NPP. I understand one thing if they were talking about the Chernobyl extinction zone, because there is enough amount of nuclear waste materials, and this waste materials is enough to be processed. And that's why, to my mind, this is just proves the fact that Russians are simply doing informational fabrications for those global informational networks. Is it under, is it known what is the situation there at Zaporizhia NPP and how do Russians behave there? Well, there are different messages regarding the Zaporizhia NPP. They all are quite urgent. First of all, there is the because we are entering the heating season, the winter season, and heating to the facilities, to the buildings should be there, and it should be sustained. But Russians do not allow these. Secondly, they are humiliating that personnel there at the Zaporizhia NPP and make them sign up to some fake agreements with Russian Atomic Energy Ministry, and this put them into quite hard psychological situation. And thirdly, there is still a present military contingent that is using Zaporizhia NPP as a military base, and NPP remains as an instrument of blackmailing of the whole world, and those events that took place on the NPP were quite violent, and those events the NPP in 2011. That is why the situation is hard. Yes, indeed, we hear that Russian occupants are pushing physically, morally Ukrainian personnel that is there on Zaporizhia APP, and it is quite understandable, and I can explain why. Because we simply, it's not because simply to take and retransform personnel from Russian Federation, from, for example, Balakovska NPP or Kurska NPP, or any other atomic power station. This is impossible. It's not possible just simply to change the license exploiting personnel on one NPP, because people, it takes from 8 to 10 years for people to be prepared to work in this power station, and they are licensed, and plus our nuclear blocks, they are modernized, they are different from those nuclear blocks that are there in Russian Federation. That is why it is understandable why Russians created this allegedly so-called um, check mode from Energodar and TCPs, and that's why it's understandable why they're accumulating the power stations, because power station workers, because without them they will not be able to exploit it and to use it. It is understandable that if they refuse to work with them, what should we wait for? I think when it comes to this question, first of all, even we have to resort to some kind of actions, and judicially and on the legislative level, to protect our personnel there. And as it right now, the nuclear blocks, they are on cold hold, and this is less safe mode of exploitation of this power station. But still, the risks still exist, and you see how many diesel generators were working on energy blocks of Zaporizhia NPP. There is still a line that is providing power to the power nets of Ukraine, and again the diesel generators will be working if they will not be working. And the safety of this object as Zaporizhia NPP is quite an intense topic. That team that is there at the premises of NPP, can they control or regulate the situations with the behavior of Russian occupants with Ukrainian personnel? It is hard to answer this question, since I'm still waiting for some kind of statement from IAEA. It's hard to say because they still are keeping contact, and there is understanding of IAEA regarding the Ukrainian personnel at Zaporizhia NPP, and you see that even the director of NPP was was stolen, and other workers of NPP are, and their current situation is unknown, and their current whereabouts is unknown, and we still expect for powerful reaction from the side of IAEA, since we're entering the winter season, and the power stations in themselves, they need their own inside needs in order to sustain the work of this object. What scenarios and events can lead to threatening and critical threatening of there at the Zaporizhia nuclear power station? Well, to my mind, everything depends. I think there is some kind of linear dependence on the actions of Ukrainian armed forces and those history that Russian Federation is urgent. When it starts, when the liberation of occupied territory starts, I think the worst case scenario is when Russians will try to make with Zaporizhia energy blocks something that we will not be able to rebuild and make it back for commercial exploiting. The scenarios can be different. However, to open the skull of occupant and to take a look what he is looking for to do in the future with a power station, it's impossible. But we have to do everything possible for us to be able to reconstruct the power station after liberation and make it back for commercial use. This will be the worst case scenario. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Here we had Hryhoriy Plachkov, the former head of the State Nuclear Regulatory Inspectorate. Thank you for this conversation. Thank you too. And as of right now, that's all. Please follow us and our announces on Mediacentru Ukraine.